Hello, welcome to this edition of Hindsight. Today we are going to talk a little bit about cricket. As is well known, the West Indies Cricket Board recently dropped two of the senior players of the team for the one-day tournament in South Africa and for the upcoming World Cup. Mr. Dwayne Bravo and Kyron Pollard, who we understand were two of the ringleaders, or the two major ringleaders, in the pullout from the Indian tour a few months ago. Well, the non-selection of those players has caused quite a stir in the Caribbean, both at the level of punditry, at the level of commentary. Lots of the pundits have weighed in, but I think also at the mass level where the ordinary cricket supporters, the ordinary masses, have weighed in on this matter. Now, I do think that part of the weakness of discussing this issue and discussing cricket in general is that we tend to discuss these issues in very narrow terms. And by that I mean that cricket is more than just a game for us in the Caribbean. It's part of our culture, part of our being, part of our nationalism. And so, therefore, it is much broader, as CLR James said. It goes beyond the boundary. And I think we suffered over the last 2 decades since West Indies fell from being the champions of the world. We suffered in that our discourse and what follows from that, our actions in relation to cricket, have been determined by this very narrow view of what we're dealing with. So that cricket is dealt with as just a sport, full stop. My argument here is that clearly we have had a crisis in our cricket for the last 20 years. But that crisis in our cricket is not divorced from the crisis in our society. Now, we know that, or we ought to know that. Yet when we try to solve the problems of our cricket, we're trying to solve them outside of the larger society. What's the dynamics of the larger society? Now, here's the story. Regardless of what the cricket board says to us, Bravo and Pollard were dropped from the team because of what happened in India. Let's don't try to get around it. That's what it is. But I think the board and the selectors were very clumsy, and the clumsiness arises from a lack of vision. Now, if you have come to the conclusion, as you ought to, that the present generation of cricketers are not going to lead to a revival of our cricket, and that you want to move on, then you needed to drop all of them. Once you drop two of them, then you open yourself to all kinds of criticisms and defeat the purpose in the final analysis. So I think that we've reached this point in our cricket where this present crop of cricketers are not going to lead the rejuvenation or even aid the rejuvenation of our cricket. And we need to move past them. We also need to move past the cricket board, and not just the members of the cricket board. We need to restructure the governance and management of West Indies cricket. And part of that restructuring means that more checks and balances within the political the cricket framework, more checks and balances in the institutions of our cricket, and then a fresh set of managers to really take us forward. So as we move forward, we need to clean this set of cricketers. They're not going to lead the rejuvenation, but also clean the cricket structures, the management structures, and the managers, so that we start with a clean slate. Now, we feel for our cricket. When we lose the way we've lost the first three one-day internationals in South Africa, The region bleeds. The region bleeds. But you know, I think we've reached a point where the society needs to have a discourse. And that discourse has to be, how do we grapple with the new dynamics in the society? Here are poor black men who are now making some money. And it means a big deal. Money is not normative if you're a poor black boy from the Caribbean. And so when you start to make money, then it introduces a new dimension to your psyche. You know, one wonder why the Australians and Englishmen and so on don't have the same problems we have. Well, making money for them is a norm. But for our players, it's not a norm. Making money introduces, like I said, a new conception, a new dimension to their psyche. And we've not had a discourse about that, about how do we deal with this new phenomenon of a few superstars making a lot of money. What that means. Now, what is very clear is that these guys are making money, and it has, in a sense, they are incapable of dealing with that within the larger context of the Caribbean nation. All right, so they make money, but as usual, the Caribbean is not making money. So we have some millionaire cricketers, but their making money has not helped our cricket. This is the key point that needs to be hammered home by those of you who could keep saying, well, everybody's they make money. Fair enough. Nothing is wrong with making money. But one has to reach the point where you're able to make money, but also not allow your making money to damage the nation, damage our cricket, and by extension to damage our nation. And this is exactly what has happened, is that our young cricketers, our young men, are now making a lot of money. But that has not helped our cricket. In fact, it has what? It has led to deterioration or helped in the deterioration of the cricket because there are other factors that helped in the deterioration of our cricket. So we have to deal with this question that in this post Cold War era, in this globalization era, where sectors of our community that in the past did not make a lot of money, that we have to grapple with that and how that impacts the larger society. I think this is what we're dealing with in our cricket. And we're not talking about that. We're not talking about how that has influenced the players' action. Now, listen, we have always had a terrible cricket board. That goes back to the 1950s when black cricketers started to come to the fore. There was always going to be that tension, that conflict between these working class black men who are now making their mark in the world and those brown and white men who were governing the cricket. And there was that tension. And although the brown and white men are no longer in charge, we have some black men who are in charge, but the same kind of mentality prevails. And so there is always going to be that tension. Well, here's the story. The Sobers era, the Worrell era, the Lloyd era, the Richards era, they dealt with terrible boards, but they continued to win. They dealt with the boards and did not allow the conflict with the board to influence and impact negatively on the field. And this is the difference with this generation, that this generation of cricketers have invariably conflict with authority because we come from a society that has a kind of reflex in terms of how we deal with authority. We're suspicious of authority. And these young men, these cricketers, Bravo, etc., they are suspicious of authority. But they are making a lot of money and they're trying to use that as a leverage in order to deal with the authority. But in the process of doing so, they're destroying the cricket and cricketing culture in the Caribbean. And this is what we've got to grapple with, and we are not grappling with. So here, we have to have a conversation about where our cricket is, and that conversation has to be carried out within the context of where our West Indian society is. And secondly, that we need to move on from this generation. We have invested in this generation for 20 years. They have not delivered in terms of moving our cricketing culture to another level. Perhaps some will argue that they're incapable of doing so. We have changed boards, one president to another president, just as we've changed captains. And we have the same kind of results. So we've got to get rid of this board. But it's not just getting rid of the personnel, as I say, it's that we've got to come up with a new cricketing structure, a governance and management structure that takes into consideration the future and takes into consideration the sensitivities of the larger Caribbean society. That's my take. We can do it, but there has to be a will to do it. And all those pundits out there who talk about cricket in this narrow sense need to stop it. But then again, lots of these pundits themselves, they come from the very society that has been socialized over the last 20 years to look at things in narrow terms rather than look at it in historical and broader terms. That, I think, has to be corrected for us to move forward. Until the next time, this is David Hinds thanking you for tuning in to yet another edition of Hinds'Sight. And remember, you can catch my other commentaries on my YouTube channel, Hinds'Sight, or you can catch my written commentaries on Guyana-Caribbean politics.com. See you next time.